All right, let me ask a question again. We've already asked it, but I'm going to ask it another time. How many of you need love? And we're asking it from the positive standpoint this time. How many need love?
All of us.
All right. What's the definition of a need?
Something you have to have, something you can't do without.
Okay, so a need is something that you cannot do without. It doesn't mean a want. Sometimes you think wants are needs and you can't do without it, but you can do without it.
Now you sound like a married man telling his wife, is this a need or a want, darling?
We don't have those discussions. You can ask her about that later, right? Confirmation. So a need is something that you must have in order to survive, right? A need is something you must have in order to survive, but also a need is something that you cannot produce. Right? A need is something that you must have to survive, but which you cannot produce. And how many of you need love? All of us. Okay. So we all need love. We must have it in order to survive, but we can't produce it. How much oxygen do you need? A lot. Well, you need as much as you need. Right? How much oxygen can you produce? None. Zero. Right? Do you need water? Yes. How much water can you produce? None. And do you need nutrients? Yes. Yeah, how much nutrients can you produce? None. Now you can be somebody's nutrients for a little while. If you go to somebody else as your nutrient source and you take from them nutrients, what are you called? Cannibal. A cannibal. That's right. What's that? Or a baby. That's right. A little tumor. Or a baby. Right. So you're a cannibal. Right? To go to somebody else as your source of nutrients, you're a cannibal. You're taking from them that which they need, and you're using them as your source. And in using them as your source, you will either use them up, right? They'll run out eventually. You'll use them up, and then you'll need another source. Right? Now, what we don't realize most of the time in our lives is that we are cannibals when it comes to love. We are cannibals when it comes to love. We go to someone else who needs love themselves to get love for us. And we feed off of them until they're empty. And in our society, empty usually lasts on average about 7 years. And then it's time to go looking for another source. Average marriage lasts about 7 years. Now, we'll get a little bit more specific into marriage in a little bit. But we all need love, and we cannibalize. Now, if you go to somebody to get what you need, but they don't have what you need, how do you feel? You might be sad. You might be frustrated, right? Let's say that somebody goes to you and they need something. They need a legitimate need, right? And you don't have it. You don't give it to them. But they needed it. How do they feel?
Disappointed.
Yeah, disappointed, frustrated, upset, right? Especially when they think you've got it and you can give it to them. Let's say a neighbor comes to you and they knock on the door and they're frantic, and you open the door and they've just discovered that their child has this rare disease and it's a terminal illness. They're going to die. But there's one place in Russia that treats this condition, and they have about a 50-50 success rate, and it's only going to cost $500,000 for them to go and get this treatment. And of course, it's there. You got to pay up front before you go. So she wants $500,000 from you. All right, how many has given her $500,000? You don't have it. You can't give it. All right? Maybe you give some. You've got a little bit that you can give her and whatever, and so you give some and whatever, you donate. But she comes back later, and she's looking for the rest of her $500,000. And she comes back later, looking for the rest of the $500,000, and comes back later and later and later. And what do you eventually do? You don't open the door. You close the blinds. You park in the garage. You put a fence around the yard. You put a German Shepherd inside, and beware rabid dog. And you get all frustrated because you don't have what she needs, and she keeps coming to you as if you're the source. But guess what? She gets frustrated too because she keeps coming to you, and she believes that you got it, and she's trying to get what she needs, and she's not getting it. And we do this with love all the time. We see each other as the source, but we're not. And then we get frustrated because we're not getting what we need. And they get frustrated because they can't give us what we need, because they're not the source. Now, whose responsibility is it for me to be filled with oxygen? It's mine. I got to breathe. Whose responsibility is it for me to be filled with water? That's mine. I got to drink, right? Whose responsibility is it for me to be filled with proper nutrients? It's mine. I got to eat it. Yeah, well, it helps to have help at home, right? Or in the garden or wherever, right? But it's my responsibility. Whose responsibility is it for me to be filled with love? Is it God's? Or is it mine? Well, let's say that there's this restaurant that just opened up in town, and it's a buffet restaurant, and it's a beautiful buffet, and it's a vegan buffet restaurant, and it's got all sorts of good healthy dishes in there, and you've got this thing and that thing and the other thing and so on, and you can go through line, and there's all these entrees, and there's these salads, and there's these, whatever, I don't know. What's that? Yeah, desserts. Right. Healthy desserts with no sugar, right? And it's called fruit, right? It has natural sugars, right? So you have all of these dishes, and you go there and you look at it, and you've been you found out that fasting was really good for you, and you've been fasting for a few days, and it's time to break your fast. That's called breakfast, right? So it's time to break your fast, and you go there, and you're thinking, oh, this is going to be great. I'm going to have some good food, and so you go there, and you go in line, and you grab your plate and your spoon and your fork and your knife and your napkin and tray and everything, and you start going through, and you look at the different things, and your mouth is watering. Oh, it looks so good, and there's this, and there's that, and there's the other thing, and you smell it, and it smells good, and that one looks really good, and that's kind of like creamy, and you walk outside. No plate, no bowl, no spoon, no anything like that, and you stand out on the front veranda area, and you go, hang on, I'm still hungry. I'm going to sue that restaurant. Think you'll get very far? I didn't think so either. And then we got to this year and we found our current government situation. And I don't know what we would do nowadays, but I don't think you would get very far with that. Why? Because everybody knows it's not the restaurant's responsibility to feed you. It's their responsibility to provide the food and to make sure it meets certain requirements, certain standards. God has a buffet of love. Right? And that buffet includes nice things like grace and harmony and security and truth and acceptance and belonging and understanding and freedom. All right, and what else do you want to throw in there? Justice. Yeah, that's part of love too. Right. So you have all of these different things, all of these different dishes, all of these different aspects, components of love. He has this buffet of love that's there and it's available. And it's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it has everything that is healthy for you that you need. And it's guaranteed to always be stocked. And the owner is really cool. And he loves people. And so he decided he would buy all the food himself and offer it free. So if you go to that restaurant, that buffet, and you walk away empty, whose fault is it? It's yours. Right. Because it's your responsibility to take that which you need. And the same thing is true with love. Who's the source? God is the source of love. That's right. And if you walk away empty, it's because you didn't take that which was available. Right? Now, if you take it, you got to give it away. But sometimes we get it backwards. I'll leave that up on there for a few minutes. Now we want to explore a little bit more about love, about human love first, before we get into, we're going to get a little bit deeper. And to do so, I want to use another story or an analogy. Imagine with me that there's somebody whom you love. You might not have to imagine, you know who they are, right? Or you loved them. They might not be alive right now. Now, you know that there's a special occasion that's coming up. It might be their birthday, it might be an anniversary, it might be a holiday or something, but you want to get them a special present. And you think about them and their personality and what they like and what they don't like, and you finally think about what you're going to get. You decide. But you don't have the money for it. So you've got to save up money in order to be able to buy the gift. And so you do. You start putting money aside, and month by month you're accumulating, and you finally have enough so that you can buy them that present. And you do. You buy the present, you wrap it up, you have a nice card with it, and so on and so forth. And the day comes when you're going to give them the present. And so you go up to the door, you knock on the door. They come to the door, smile on your face, you hand them the present. And they get the present, they look at it, and they throw it on the ground, they stomp on it, and they slam the door. And you're left standing outside. How do you feel? Angry. Broken. What else? Sad. What? Confused. All right? Now, these are different ways that we feel that the present is rejected. Right? All right, next scenario. You've been working for UPS for several years. You like your job. You know, you get to wear this cool brown uniform, you get to drive these cool big brown trucks, and you get to drive around and carry brown packages to brown homes, and so on and so forth, and life is all brown except it's greener on the other side, right? So anyways, you know, but you get the other green stuff which you like, you know, money. And so, you know, you like the job, and you've been working for them for a while, and one day you're driving along, and you stop at a particular residence, and you get out and you give them you grab the package, you go up to the front door, and you knock on the door. The resident of the home comes out. You have them sign for their package. They sign for it. They take the package. They throw it on the ground. They stomp on it, and they slam the door, and you're left standing outside. How do you feel? You wouldn't care. You wouldn't care either. You're worried about doing a bad job. You're wondering about what's wrong with them. That's right, what's wrong with them? Right? Exactly. So why, in the first scenario, you respond where you are angry, or you are crushed, or you are hurt, or you are confused, or other things like that. And in the second scenario, you don't care. Oh. All right, so the first one, you're having issues. Why? Because it's mine.
It's personal.
That's mine. That's right. It's personal. And the second one, you're not having issues. Why? Because it's not mine, right? And the first one, it's mine. It was my present, purchased with my money, which represented my love. And that was my, and you fill in the blank, my person, right? My spouse, my significant other, my child, my parent, my whatever it was, right? And over here, it's not mine. So to the degree that I believe that it is mine is the degree to which I personally am hurt and am offended and so on and so forth if that which was mine was given away and was rejected. But similarly, to the degree which I recognize that it's not mine is the degree to which I do not hurt or take things personally and so on and so forth when that is done. Okay. Now there's another thing. It's not just that it's mine and it's not mine. Also, you and I, we have this thing where we give to receive. Ever heard the phrase, no strings attached? Yeah? In human love, there's no such thing as no strings attached. There's always strings attached, right? What's the string? One of the other terms that we could call the string? Expectations. Right? We have expectations associated with the gifts and the giving that we have. Why is one reason that you're disappointed with the result of the gift? Is because you had expectations of what you would receive back from the gift. At least they could be grateful. At least they could say thank you. At least they could put a smile on their face. At least when they gave them a present of socks and underwear for Christmas, they could say, thank you for the socks and the underwear. Instead of going, hang on, socks, underwear, hang on, where's the real present? You have expectations in regards to the gift, right? And in the giving, right? So we give in order to receive. How do you know whether you're giving to receive? You only really know when you don't receive. And when you don't receive, how you respond to it tells you whether you were expecting anything or not, right? So let's now, and of course, giving to receive, what is that like? That is, let's turn it into financial terms. You think about this, and we'll take it out of love and throw it into finances for a little bit. When you give something in order to receive something back, what do you call that? Financially.
A return.
Right.
Return on investment.
That's right. So you've got an investment, right? So you're putting something of value into something so that you can get something back out of it, right? And generally, you're looking for something of greater value back from what you put into the thing in the first place, right? So we invest a value into something to get something of greater value back. Now, what are the things that are of lesser value or greater value? Well, what about money? What about time? What about, let's see, what are other things that you could, money gets turned into presents, right? Or things, right? Stuff, right? These are all different things that you could value. But what is the value of that compared to acceptance? How about getting along with someone, so having some harmony, right? Or what about feeling secure in a relationship, right? Having security or whatever. Would you be willing to spend some money in order to get some acceptance? Or give some presents in order to be secure in a relationship? Or to spend some time in order to be in harmony with someone else? Yeah. We take things of lesser value and put them into someone so that we can get things of greater value back. What is it that we value the most when we get down to it? I should say this a different way, because the answer would not be true based upon the question that I asked. What is it that we need the most? Love. That's right. What do we need the most? We need love the most. And intrinsically, in a way, we understand that. And so we will barter money and time and presents and things and other things like that so that we can get these aspects of love. So we will give in order to receive. We invest in others. Let me ask you this. Does God invest in His children?
He invested Jesus.
The answer is no. God doesn't invest in His people, in His children. I'll answer that in a little bit. All right, now let's look at the heart. Let's get to the heart of the matter. Let's look at the heart. What is the heart? And we're not talking about the blood pumping muscle right now. Right? What is the heart? The heart is the place where we make decisions, subconscious decisions. And these subconscious decisions that we make are based upon two criteria. Let me get this lower. I've got a little bit of room. We make these decisions based upon gain and loss. That's right. So we make decisions based upon gain and loss. So little old me. And I decide in such a way that I always say no to loss, and I always say yes to gain. And that's not a hard thing for us to understand. Okay, we'll just do a scenario here. Let's just imagine that there's only one door at the back of the room, and there's only one door at the front of the room. And those are the two ways to get out. So if you go out the back, you have to pay me $1,000 to get out. And there's no bathroom in here. To go out the, well, actually, I should turn it around because this would be, anyways, to go out the back, you have to pay $1,000 to me. If you go out the front, I pay you $1,000. Which door are you going out? You're going out the front door, that's right. Out of the mouth of babes, right? All right, you're going out the front. Why? Because you'll always choose a gain over a loss, right? If you're between a gain and a loss, you're always going to choose a gain. Now, let's change it a little bit. Let's say if you go out the back, you have to pay me $1,000. But if you go out the front, you pay me $10. Which door are you going out? Going out the front door. Why? Because if you're confronted with two losses, you'll always choose the smaller loss. Okay? And finally, if you go out the back door, I pay you $10. But if you go out the front door, I pay you $1,000. Which door are you going out? Front door. You're always going out the front door. Why? Because you always choose a greater gain over a smaller gain. Right? So we're always choosing in this direction towards the gain, and we're always choosing away from the loss. That's just how we function. Now, because that's the case, and because we determine that yes, we will choose a gain over a loss, that means that you can't be tempted to lose. Right? You can't be tempted to lose. So, Kyra, get to pick on you again. So I've got this bottle here, and it's got some swishy stuff in there. And I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to mix a few things up and get a drip, 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 and a few things like that, and whatever, and I'm going to and it has some bat blood, and it has some mercury, and it has some arsenic, and it has some rattlesnake venom, and it's got some water in there too, lots of water actually. But it has a few poisons in there, and it's guaranteed to kill you with no antidote, and it's guaranteed to kill you slowly, and it's guaranteed to be painful in the process. Want some?
Sure, why not?
Tempted?
No.
No. Anybody else want some? No. All right. It's not a temptation to lose. Right? So how are you ever going to get to loss? Anybody ever lost? Everybody ever feel like you're like stuck in loss? How do you get there if you can't ever be tempted to lose? You have to be tricked into thinking loss is gain and gain is loss. Right? You have to be tricked into thinking loss is gain and gain is loss. If you believe that the loss is a gain, you'll go for it as a gain, even though it's a loss. And if you think that the gain is a loss, you'll avoid the gain because you think it's a loss. And let's take the oldest story in history and see how that worked. Because it's right there. And I think I'll read it a little bit in a funny way because I'm tethered. So it comes from Genesis, and it's found in chapter 3, and beginning in verse 1. Now before this, God had told Adam and Eve something. He said they were a couple, there's a lot of trees in here and you can eat all of them. But how many trees were they not supposed to eat from? One. Which one was it? Tree of knowledge of good and evil. He says, in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die, right? So God said, all right, don't eat it, because if you eat it, you lose. And if you don't eat it, well, you gain, right? You get to live. Well, in chapter 3, in verse 1, it says, now the serpent was more cunning than any beast of the field.
And we don't have to look at it funny.
Thank you. All right, now the serpent was more subtle or cunning than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said to the woman, has God indeed said, you shall not eat of every tree of the garden? Insinuating a little doubt. And the woman said to the serpent, well, we may eat the fruit of the tree of the garden, but of the fruit which is in the midst of the garden, of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, you shall not eat it, neither shall you touch it, lest you die. And then the serpent said to Eve, come on, Eve, think about it. Well, he was probably a little bit less blunt than that, but he was probably just reasoning with her and saying, you know what, I understand your reluctance. I'm a snake. Have you ever run into a snake that can talk? No. And like months ago, I couldn't talk either. But I came to this tree, and I ate the fruit. And when I ate the fruit, I got the ability to speak, to think, to reason. I had powers that I never knew of before. And I've been coming to this tree and I've been eating from it for months. And I'm not dead. And God knows. God knows. Right? In verse 5, God knows in the day that you eat of it, your eyes will be open and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. He knows. So the enemy came along. God said, if you eat it, you lose. If you don't eat it, you gain. The enemy came along and said, he just turned the whole thing right upside down. And he says, no. If you eat it, you gain. And if you don't eat it, well, you'll just be ignorant Eve, and you'll never know what you're missing out on. You'll never know. And you'll always wonder. And then verse 6 tells us what happened. And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate it. Why did she take of the fruit and eat it? She couldn't do anything else. Why? Because she believed it was the gain. And once she believed it was the gain, she had to do it. You see, the enemy didn't need to get her actions. He had to get her beliefs. All right, now let's look at this a little bit. So we have this human love, right? And this human love gives to receive. And that human love is an investment. All right, running out of space. All right, so it's an investment. And if we give to receive, then what's our gain? Our gain is to receive. So as long as we're receiving, great, right? We're happy. Life is good. It's going well. Even if it's from the bad context. Like, your nighttime career is stealing cars. Well, you get away with it. And you get to drive them really fast and, and all that kind of stuff. And you're receiving, right? My life is good for now. What's loss if receiving is gain? Loss is to not receive. enough. Or to have your treasure taken away, whatever that treasure is. So anybody like it when your car gets stolen? Or when your house gets broken into? Or a loved one dies, they're no longer around? Or spouse rejects you and walks away? Or so on and so forth? No. I mean, all of those are losses, right? And not receiving enough. You know, the present gets thrown down, stomped on the ground, and you're left outside with the door slammed in your face, right? All of those are losses. And so gaining is receiving, loss is not receiving enough. Now let's throw this into a relationship context, all right? So you have a young man and a young woman, and they kind of pass each other, and there's this thing that happens. I still haven't figured out how to describe this one, but I just use a sound and people figure it out. I just say it's kind of like a zzz thing that happens, right? And so you know the two pass each other and zzz happens, and so it feels good. You like it, and so you want some more of it. And so what do you have to do? Well, you've got to give. You've got to invest in order to receive. And so maybe you try to get a little bit closer to the individual, spend some time with them, you know, maybe go out on a date and other stuff like that. And so you put a little bit of risk out there in order to try to get some more of that back. And there's reciprocation, and it's nice, and so on and so forth. And life is great, right? Because you're receiving and you're happy, and you're giving and you're receiving and they're giving and they're receiving and they're happy, and it's just, it's beautiful. Right? And then eventually, you know, you give more and they give more and you give more and they give more and you give more and they give more and you receive more and so on, and that's great. And you eventually come to the point where you think, you know what, I think they're a permanent gain. And when you think they're a permanent gain, what do you have to do? You got to get over your fear of Papa Bear. And if you ever have to get through Papa Bear, right? Yeah, so you got to ask them to marry you, right? And you hope that they think that you're a permanent gain as well, because if they think you're a permanent gain, what are they going to say? Yes, that's right. And so now you're onto the engagement period, and you know you're blazing on towards marriage, and you know there's still a lot of giving and receiving, and life is good. And then what happens?
They got sick.
You get married. Oh yeah, that part. Yeah, you get married. That's right. You get married. So you've been fishing. Anybody ever gone fishing? Yeah. How much energy does it take to go fishing and catch the fish as opposed to keeping the fish? There's a lot of investment into getting the fish, right? And your fall is very big about investing in getting fish, right? Big boats and GPS systems and you know, and all of this kind of stuff, and all fancy equipment, and of course you've got to have poles and bait and everything that goes along with it. But what do you have to do? What do you have to keep the fish? Just a hook or a bucket, right? It doesn't take that much. So you caught your fish. You invested a lot. Now you're married and it's secured. And then you remember, well, you know, I used to have hobbies and I used to have other stuff like that. And, you know, well, you buy a big bucket. It's called a house, right? So you get a big bucket. So you got to pay big money for the big bucket. So you got to go to work and to pay for it. And so there's less time, so there's less giving. But if you've raised their bar of expectations by your giving, and now you're giving less, what do they have to do? They have to lower their expectations, right? They got to lower their expectations. That's the only way the human heart can mitigate its losses, is by lowering its expectations. So they lower their expectations, and you give less and they lower, and you give less and they lower, and then you give less and they lower, and you give less and they lower, and so on and so forth. And then you finally get to limbo, and with limbo, you know, you eventually get to a point where enough is enough, right? Enough is enough. And so you say, all right, enough is enough. I'm not going to lower my expectations anymore. And if you don't lower your if you don't lower your expectations anymore, if they stay at this level, and the other person is performing before that level, where are you? Are you in gain or loss? You're in loss. Right? And can you stay in loss? There's one way that you can stay in loss. That is, if your current loss, by staying in that, you are avoiding a greater loss. Then you can stay in loss. That's the only way that you can stay in loss. Right? So what's the greater loss? Well, maybe you come from a Christian background and you believe that God hates divorce, and it would disappoint him if you did that, and so you would rather stay in the misery than disappoint God. So you stay in the marriage. But somebody comes along and they talk to you and they convince you that, you know, it's okay, and you can just, you know, God didn't intend for you to, so on and so forth, and you can do whatever, and then you can ask for forgiveness, and, you know, and then it'll be all okay, and so on. And so you get convinced and you believe that, and then what do? Well, now it's the greater loss. And you always say no to the greater loss. Right? So you've got two options. You can either cut your losses, or you can go searching for another gain. And here we find most of America, right? 7 years on average. Why? Because this is the heart that we have, and this is how it functions, this is how it operates. Now, remember, this heart had also said, it's mine. Right? It's mine. What's mine? Well, the present was mine, so I have. Or I possess. I can. I can produce. I can make it. And I am. What am I? I'm my own. To do whatever I want to with me. Right? So whatever it is, it's mine. And I gave it away. It's mine. Why? Because I produced it. I made it. It came from me. And I am my own to do whatever I want to with me. This is the understanding of the human heart that gives to receive, that invests in others, whose gain is receiving and loss is not receiving, or not receiving enough, or having the treasure taken away. And this is the basic underlying premise. Now, let me ask you, how much that you have is yours? Okay. None. Where do you get that from? What's that? Well, the Bible. The Bible tells you that nothing that you have is your own. Why? Well, God said, all the silver and the gold are mine, saith the Lord. He has all the cattle in the 1,000 hills, and all the 1,000 hills in which the cattle are on, and so on and so forth. He's the creator. He made it all, so it all actually belongs to him. We're just the stewards of what his resources are. So how much do I actually possess? I possess 0. It all belongs to God. Now, if you're in a sandbox, and you're 3 years old, and you're playing with another child, and you have a Tonka truck that you're playing with, and it's yours, and then that other child comes along and they take that Tonka truck away and they start playing with it and they won't give it back, and they tell you, no, it's not yours, it's mine now. What would you say that child is?
A thief.
All right, so you might call them a thief. That's right. And what's the character quality that they're manifesting? Selfishness. Right? So to believe that I have it, that I possess it, when I don't, is really selfishness. And what's the underlying character quality behind thinking that I can produce it and that I'm my own to do whatever I want to with it? Ah, there we go. Pride. That's right. So let's just get painfully honest right now. You and I, the motivation that we can come up with for what we do, the love that we have that gives to receive, that invests in others, that human love whose gain is receiving, loss is not receiving, or having the treasure taken away, the foundation, the motivation behind this heart and the love that it produces is selfishness and pride. And that's all the motivation you can come up with, and I can come up with, for what we do. It's true for the love that we have for our children, for our parents, for our spouses, for anybody else, and it's true for the love that we can come up with to love God with in return. Why? Because it's a love that first gives in order to receive. Right? A lot of prosperity theology going on, and so on and so forth, and whatever. It's selfishness and pride, and that's why the Bible said, that's why Isaiah tells us, all of our righteousnesses are what? Filthy rags. Filthy rags. That's all we can come up with. And we might thought that we were okay, but of course Jeremiah 17:9 tells us that the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who could know it? Who alone can give first without first receiving something in order to be able to give it? God. That's right. So to give first, to receive, is really saying, I am God. And so the lie that the enemy told Eve in the garden is the lie that every one of us lives by every day of our lives, of thinking that we're God. In fact, you could never choose anything other than what God wants for you to do in your life, if it weren't the fact that you thought you were at least equal to Him to choose differently. Right? And so we find ourselves selfish, proud, and putting ourselves in the place of God. So it's kind of miserable, isn't it? But I don't want to land in miserable. We want to get out of miserable, and we want to look at the beauty on the other side. This is not what God had intended for us, and this is not what God still intends for us. He has something better in store for us. What is that? There's a different love, a divine love. And that love does not give to receive, it takes to give. Just like going to that buffet restaurant, your first thing you must do is take of that food, right? Because you can't give anything away. You don't have anything to give away, so you must come and you must take of it first. But the object in this heart is not to keep it to yourself, it's to give it away. And remember I said God does not invest in His children? It's because His love is not an investment. It's a gift. Right? An investment has expectations for myself in regards to the gift. Right? I expect something for myself from the gift. A gift does not come along with those expectations. I may have expectations for someone else, right? For their good, but I don't have expectations for myself and how that would return to me. And over here in this new heart, our gain is not just to receive, our gain is to give. And the joy comes in the giving. And the loss is if I keep it to myself. Does God lose? Will he lose? No. So he won't stop giving. Because to stop giving love would be to lose. And he won't. And so it doesn't matter if you like him, if you don't. It doesn't matter if you know about him or not. It doesn't matter if you're a good person or a bad person. There's no good person anyways. He gives his love because he loves. That's who he is. That's his nature. And over here, this heart recognizes it's not mine. It's not mine. Right? I don't have or possess it. I can't produce it. And I am not my own to do whatever I want to with me. Have you ever seen that in living color? That heart in operation? It's precisely the heart of Jesus. Right? Precisely the heart of Jesus. It's not his. He recognized, what did he say? They came and, Master, and can I follow you? And he said, foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. He didn't lay claim on anything as his possession. And he was talking to people and he says, I can of my own self do nothing. Oh, it's amazing what you can do when you can't do anything. And it's equally amazing what you cannot accomplish when you think you can do it. Okay. And he was the one who says, I do nothing of my own. I speak nothing of my own, but what my Father tells me. And he inspired Paul to write that we were not our own. We were bought at a price. Therefore glorify God in our body and our spirit, which are his. Right? So Jesus was the ultimate UPS delivery guy. He was the one who would bring the packages of his Father's love to others. But if the package was destroyed, was rejected, he never hurt for himself. That doesn't mean that he never hurt. He did. He was a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. But who did he hurt for? He hurt for them. And the fact that they were rejecting love. They were walking away from life, and so on. Why come up with this? Anyway, so let me hit a few more points and then we'll come to a conclusion here. If I take first, that means that I recognize that I am a creature. Right? I am a creation. I'm not the creator. So that means I'm a steward of that which is his resources. Now, the fun thing, or the not so fun thing about this old heart, this human love that gives to receive, is I am a slave to others. Why am I a slave to others? Because I'm dependent upon them whether I receive or whether I don't. I go to them as my source of love. I cannibalize from this heart, right? And I see them as my source, so I go to them as my source, and they have what I need, but I'm not receiving. Or sometimes I am, and other times I'm not, but I can't control them. I can't control what they do, or how they respond, or how they give. Yet I need what they have, or so I think. And so I'm constantly, sometimes frustrated, sometimes it's going well, other times it's not going so well, and so on and so forth, but I'm so dependent upon them, and what they say and what they think and what they do impacts me so significantly. Why? They're my source, and I'm a slave to them. Whereas in this other heart, over here, I am free. Because who determines whether I give or whether I keep? I do. And it's my giving and my keeping that determines my gain or losses. It doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter how you respond. That doesn't affect my gains or my losses. And so I'm free because I'm in control. And the things that used to cause loss before are no longer things that can't cause that loss now. There's an interesting law that you find in the Bible. Jesus says that if you want to keep your life, you must lose it. But if you would lose your life for my sake and for the gospel's, you would keep it, right? God is trying to open our eyes so that we see things from a different perspective. And so that we understand that if you want to keep something, what do you have to do? You have to give it away. That's right. If you want to keep something, you have to give it away. But in this world, if you want to keep something, what do you have to do? You got to hang on. That's right. You got to hold on to it. You want money, and you got to hold on to it. You got to protect it. You got to hide it. You got to get it safe and do all that kind of stuff. That's not how it works in God's kingdom. You want to keep something, you give it away. But if you can give it away, you got to have it first, and so you got to go to the source first to take it so that you can give it away. So, do you need acceptance? Anybody? All right. Anybody here not need acceptance? Blood sugars are low right now. You're going to get to lunch, right? All right, so you need acceptance. You go to God and take the acceptance that you need. He's got the buffet of love. It's always open. It's always full. It's always free. Come and take. And when you have it, do you want acceptance to remain yours? What do you have to do? You got to give it away. You have to accept others, right? Or do you need belonging? Sure. Where do you go? Go to God. He's the source. So you go and you take that belonging from God. But you want it to remain yours, what do you have to do? You have to give it away. Let others belong. Right? Do you need forgiveness? Lord knows I do. Oh, yeah, Lord help. Do you need forgiveness? Sure, go to the source. God has all the forgiveness you need. Go and take that forgiveness. It's free, it's available, but you want forgiveness to remain yours, what do you have to do? You got to give it away. You got to forgive others. The moment you hold it to yourself, what happens? You lose it. That's right. You lose it. You know, Jesus mentioned in the Sermon on the Mount, he said, if you don't forgive your brother, then my Father in heaven won't forgive you. But it's not that God's saying, oh, well, I can't believe you did that, and I'm going to be that same way towards you. No, it's just a divine law, and that's how it functions. And he just knows that if you hold it to yourself, you've lost it. That's just how it works, right? All right, so let's look at this. Why are we talking about this in a health series? Why?
This is relevant. The mind, the body, spirit, so it's all relevant.
Okay. It's all relevant, but it's relevant in ways that maybe we haven't been thinking of. You get down here, and you have disease. And disease is, again, dysfunction. You have those cells, and they're not functioning the way that they're supposed to. You have that roadway, and you've deviated from the roadway, and you've traveled farther and farther away from that pathway, and there's progressive dysfunction because of that. You have the tree, and the tree is diseased, and maybe you've been picking out the fruit and the leaves, but you really got to get down to the roots, and you got to get down to the soil. You don't fix a tree by doing surgery on the roots. You fix a tree by fixing the soil, the sources. What do you need? Yeah, you need oxygen, you need water, you need sunshine, you need all of that kind of stuff. Yes, you need that, but what do you need more than oxygen? Love. That's right. You would choose to die rather than lose love. Or you would choose to die because you've lost it and you have no hope of regaining it. You need love more than you need life. Right? And if you don't get nutrients, what will that do to your body?
That's the end.
Yeah, it will eventually die. And if you don't get water, what will happen to your body? You'll eventually die a little bit faster. If you don't get oxygen, what will happen to your body? You're going to die a lot faster. And if you don't get love, what will happen? You'll die too. And most people don't realize it's even faster than losing oxygen. Because love is the foundation of the electrical activity that keeps the nervous system going and the rest of the body going as well. And you know how fast you die when you stop thinking? It's like that. Right? You need love greater than you need oxygen. Right? It's a greater need for us. And if you are lacking it, how will it affect the health? If you're going to the wrong source and you're drinking from a polluted stream of water, you might end up with giardia and all types of symptoms like I did. But if you go to the wrong source and you're getting the wrong love, what's that going to do for the health as well? Spirit's not going to have the right things that it needs in order to think, which creates the different kinds of energy, which then is transmitted via the nervous system and the nerves to the various different cells of the body, and the cells begin to dysfunction, to not function the way that they're supposed to. I will say this, and you can believe me or not believe me. Loss. Personal loss. Taking it personally. Whether my treasure was taken away or whether I didn't receive or I didn't receive enough. Personal loss is the greatest factor that contributes to physical disease. It's the greatest factor that contributes to physical disease. We all know that stress is bad, right? Anybody here confused about that aspect, that stress is bad, right? Not good for the health? Things don't function so well when one is stressed. How stressful is it to lose your treasure? The house burns down. And the car was parked in the garage, and so it's gone too. And the insurance policy had lapsed. And you had just been laid off from work. And your spouse and children were in the house when it burned down.
Well, I guess according to what you said in the first place, it didn't belong to us.
That's right. It didn't belong to us in any way. And that, somebody who's living over here will have an entirely different response to those situations than somebody who's living over here. But this personal loss is the most significant contributor to disease. And I wish I had time. I mean, when I teach the students this, I get 12 hours and I still run out of time. And so we have a very truncated time, and there's stories and there's examples and so on and so forth about how this works and looking at it working in the lives of individuals. But I'll tell you this, I deal with individuals that have cancer all the time. At our center, I can't remember a session, and we have 2.5-week sessions, and they're back to back. So every 3 weeks we're starting a new session throughout the year. And I can't remember a session where we have not had somebody that had cancer. And initially I was just doing the lifestyle stuff and whatever with them, and that's good. We need to do that. It's beneficial, helpful. And again, the last session that we have today, we're going to talk about natural ways of reversing cancer. Right? But when I began to understand this stuff, then I began to ask different questions. And so somebody comes in and they develop breast cancer. And maybe it started on the right side, and then it got into a few lymph nodes, and by the time they did the biopsy, they said, oh, okay, well, it's invasive ductal carcinoma. We need to take that out. We're going to do a lumpectomy and take a few of the lymph nodes. Oh, well, 4 of the lymph nodes are positive. Well, now we need to look at doing chemotherapy, radiation. We're going to check it for its estrogen receptor, progesterone receptor, and HER2/neu receptors and see if they're positive or they're negative. Okay, well, estrogen receptor is positive. We can put you on some estrogen receptor blockers and so on, and do all of this in order to take care of the breast cancer. Well, I used to ask questions about, okay, well, how have you been eating, and how have you been exercising, and are you drinking your water? What are the bad things that you're eating and drinking, and so on and so forth? And that was the predominant thing that I was looking at in an individual's life, and so I found correlations. But when I started understanding this, I started asking entirely different questions. So what's the greatest stressor in your life? What are the greatest losses that you sustain? When did you sustain them? How is your relationship between you and your mother and you and your father, and what was their relationship to each other, and how do you relate to your siblings, and what's going on with your spouse, and what happened when you had the abortion, and so on and so forth. Asking really those questions. And what I have found in almost every case, there's a few cases that haven't fit yet, and I think that I just haven't asked the right questions. Almost every case, there is a major loss, a major personal loss in the life of the individual within the year or a few years before the time that they develop their cancer. It's a major factor. Why? Now there's a whole new field of research. Well, I'd say it's new, but it's been around for a while. It's called neuroimmunology. And neuroimmunology is looking at the connection between the nervous system and its control upon the immune system and how it functions. A series of studies that were done between 2000 and 2013, and what they did is they were testing an anti-inflammatory chemical for its anti-inflammatory properties. And you have to do a bunch of studies in rats and so on and so forth before you can ever get to human trials. And so they were doing the rat trials. And one of the studies that you have to do is inject some of this around the brain to see how the brain responds to it, if it gets across the blood-brain barrier, and so on and so forth. So they did. They injected this chemical around the brain of the rats. And lo and behold, they found an unusual response, and the unusual response was that the rats turned off their production of tumor necrosis factor alpha, TNF-alpha. Well, why am I concerned about tumor necrosis factor alpha? Well, it's a prominent inflammatory molecule that's involved in a lot of the inflammatory process, but TNF-alpha is not produced in the brain. It's produced in the body elsewhere, but they weren't finding any blood levels of the chemical elsewhere in the body, so they're wondering what's going on. How come this is happening? What's the mechanism? Well, it took them years to break it down and to figure it out, and they published 5 different papers over the next 13 years discovering different aspects of this process. And this is ultimately what they found, is that when they injected the substance around the brain, it changed the signal that was being sent from the brain down the vagus nerve to the abdomen, through the chest, to the abdomen, and to the spleen. And in the spleen, the signal was then received by T helper cells in the immune system. The T helper cells then went to the natural killer cells, the NK cells, and the natural killer cells are the big producers of tumor necrosis factor alpha, or TNF alpha, in the system, in the body. And the natural killer cells turned off their production of tumor necrosis factor alpha because of that signal and the communication cascade that happened. Now they were able to go back and get a nerve stimulator and in these rats isolate the vagus nerve, change the signal that was sent down the vagus nerve, and they could cause the same type of response to happen in the immune system by stimulating it in the vagus nerve rather than having to inject it around the brain. And they started a new biotech company looking at developing nerve stimulators so that they can modify disease process. And two of the areas that they're really researching right now are areas of cancer and arthritis. Right? Arthritis, why? Well, you take anti-inflammatory pain medication and it can tear up the gut. It can increase gastric bleeding, and you can have reflux disease and gastritis and all sorts of problems from that standpoint. Plus, now we know that all of the NSAIDs increase blood pressure. It increases heart attack rates and so on and so forth. So your Aleve doesn't necessarily alleviate you, and whatever. So there's all sorts of complications associated with it. But if we can identify the nerves that are going to your knee, and you've got arthritis in that knee, and we can figure out how to stimulate that nerve just right, then maybe we can cause the cells in that area to release natural body-produced anti-inflammatory chemicals just there. So you don't have all the systemic effects of the medication, but you get the benefit of having the anti-inflammation and the decrease in pain and all of that kind of stuff. And maybe we can figure that out. And the other thing that they're looking at is cancer. Why? Again, as I mentioned before, because we have studies and research that's showing that if you change the electrical signal that is sent to the center of a tumor, you can change how that tumor behaves. Whether it grows or how fast it grows and whether it spreads and so on and so forth. And so maybe we can manipulate the impulse that's being sent down the nerve to that tumor and slow it down or stop it. Well, how do you and I do that every day of our lives? Do we control our immune system? I'm not saying consciously. Yeah. Yeah. The immune system is under the control of the nervous system. Right? All the systems of the body are under control of the nervous system. And how do we do that every day? We do that through the way we think. And we do it through our attitudes and our behaviors and our responses to others and so on and so forth. And this issue of personal loss is very powerful because it then, through the nervous system, changes the function of the cells and how they function.
Calling those things that are not to be as though they were.
Right. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very powerful stuff. Now, how is God going to save you from personal loss? So that it's not continuing to be the major contributor to disease. It's simple, really. Very simple. He simply wants to give you a new heart. And in giving you a new heart that functions with a different love, whose gain is to give and loss is to keep, who recognizes it's not mine. It never was. My only loss is if I keep it to myself. I'm free, even while I recognize that I'm a creature. That new heart separates me from the personal losses that used to contribute to the disease. And so when the personal losses are taken away, well, guess what you can do? Heal. And so when I have individuals and I am caring for them, I'm not just interested in what you're eating and drinking. I'm interested in that as well. That's important, right? But I'm not just interested in that. I'm interested in what you're thinking. And I'm interested in how you're hurting. And I'm interested in what's going on from that standpoint, because I know those are the real issues that are the real drivers behind it. Right? And I want those things to be resolved. Now, the new heart is God's way to save us from current personal hurts. But some of us have pasts. We've got history. People have done stuff to us, and we've responded in ways that weren't so nice. And we've got baggage. Is it possible to undo the past so that we don't have the baggage anymore? And the answer is yes, but we're not going to explore that right now. We're going to take a short break, and then we're going to take a long break with lunch. And after that break, we're going to talk about erasing the past and what that looks like. And then we're going to get on after that to reversing diabetes naturally, reversing high blood pressure naturally, and reversing cancer naturally. But at this point, I want to have a prayer. And in doing so, I'm going to pray for the food as well when it gets ready. And then we will take a break and be back together again, well, for eating now, but then for the lectures at, when is it, 2:30? 2:30. All right. Well, let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for your blessings and your loving kindness to us. We are grateful for the opportunity of being here. And Lord, help us to realize, help our eyes to be open to see that the issues that need to be dealt with are much deeper than maybe we have usually looked at. And draw us ever close to you and work out the abundance of your grace. Give us that new heart. You said in Ezekiel 36, 26, and 27, you said, I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit within you. I will take the heart of stone out of your flesh and give you a heart of flesh. I will put my spirit within you and cause you to walk in my statutes, and you will keep my judgments and do them. Lord, thank you for that promise. Do that work in us even now as we seek for it, ask for it. Come to your buffet of love and take of that love, recognizing you as our source. And Lord, in doing that, change us and transform us that those losses may melt away and we may enter into a new experience with a new heart that is entirely different. Bless this food as well, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen.